No one paid attention at first. Just a girl in a wheelchair on a school field trip. Nothing special. But when she pointed toward the new building and calmly asked a question, the entire group fell silent. Some adults chuckled, the architect smiled politely, the foreman even scoffed, until they heard what she actually said. Then everything changed. Before we dive in, subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? The sky was painted in dull grays, a quiet pause between seasons, between chapters. In a fourth-floor corner apartment, a soft warmth fogged the windows. Inside, surrounded by models of futuristic towers and experimental bridges, 14-year-old Aaliyah James worked in silence. Her fingers, steady and confident, adjusted the matchstick frame of a geodesic dome. Her wheelchair didn't define her. Her sharp mind and unstoppable curiosity did. The apartment looked like a forgotten museum of genius. Rolled blueprints poked from corners. Drafts of long-abandoned designs lay scattered, some pinned under coffee mugs, and right in the heart of that quiet storm sat Aaliyah. Her father, Edward James, shuffled in with a cane and something heavier: disappointment. Once celebrated as one of the city's top architects, he had been quietly pushed out, his greatest designs stolen and rebranded by the firm he helped build. He never spoke about it, but the silence said enough. "Morning, Starshine," he murmured, dropping an envelope beside her project. She glanced up, eyebrow raised. "You quoting musicals now?" "Only on important days," he replied with a tired half-smile. The envelope held a glossy invitation, the grand opening of the city's new innovation center, a sustainable design hailed as the future of architecture. And the guest of honor? Gregory Mann. The man who had erased Edward from his own project, taking full credit for a concept born at their kitchen table. Aaliyah stared at the invite. "That's your building." Edward nodded. "It was. And Gregory, he's the one who fired me," Edward finished quietly. "They probably think I won't show up. Just a PR stunt." She looked him in the eye. "Then let's surprise them." He hesitated. "No drama. We go as guests." She only smiled. The next morning, they arrived downtown. The Innovation Center shimmered like a monument to ego. The entrance was grand, framed by metallic columns shaped like futuristic trees. A glowing message floated above the doors. "Welcome to Future Built, designing tomorrow today." Inside, suits buzzed like wasps. At the center stood Gregory Mann, perfectly polished, speaking to the media with his signature smile. Edward looked away, and then Aaliyah raised her hand. They called her a guest, not a student, not a daughter, just a guest. The kind of subtle dismissal people use when they avoid saying wheelchair, but still treat it like a limitation. Aaliyah didn't react. She was used to being overlooked. They were guided through the gleaming new building like tourists on a museum tour. Solar atrium, kinetic floor, floating garden bridge. Everything sparkled, but none of it felt real. It was architecture chasing perfection, not purpose. Aaliyah noticed the plants weren't rooted in real soil. The garden walkway was too narrow for two wheelchairs to pass at once. The so-called accessible elevators were traps if more than two people rolled in. She saw everything. She always did. Then came the West Wing, a bright, glass-walled gallery. That's where she saw it. A dramatic spiral ramp curling down from the upper floors like a ribbon of brushed steel and LED light. Their symbol of inclusion, their showpiece. It was also a lie. Her father stepped away to greet an old colleague, leaving Aaliyah alone. She rolled toward the ramp. At first glance, it was beautiful, but something felt off. She placed her hand on the railing. It wobbled. Cautiously, she rolled forward. Halfway down, her wheels slipped. No grip. Too steep. Too smooth. She had to fight to regain control. Her heart racing, she climbed back up. At the top, a suited man had been watching. "Everything okay?" he asked casually, amused. She nodded. then whispered, "It's not safe." He chuckled. "State of the art, maybe not what you're used to." Then he walked off. Aaliyah stared at the ramp again. The lights underneath it masked everything, even a tiny crack in the panel, barely visible, but real and dangerous. She wasn't angry. This wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about that inner voice whispering, "Something's wrong," and no one's listening. Not yet. Back in the West Atrium, the room buzzed with admiration. Politicians, designers, and executives sipped champagne beneath banners, reading, "Tomorrow begins today." Aaliyah sat quietly, her chair barely making a sound on the polished floors. But her thoughts were loud. That ramp, too steep, too slick, too fragile. The wobble she felt, the danger no one saw. Her father had told her not to make a scene, but this wasn't just his story anymore. As the group moved on toward another display, Aaliyah let herself drift behind. Then, without hesitation, she turned her chair and rolled back to the ramp. No one stopped her, no one noticed. They were too busy clapping for the future. But she wasn't done with the present. The first thing she noticed was the slope. It looked standard, only a couple degrees steeper than regulations allowed. But in practice, that small deviation could be dangerous, especially for someone weaker, tired, or distracted. If she had rolled down just a bit faster, she might have lost control completely. Then came the texture, or rather, the lack of it. The ramp was polished to a shine, designed for aesthetics, not safety. No grip strips, no tread, just a glossy surface that reflected light beautifully and betrayed function completely. It wasn't an accessible ramp, it was a runway. She tested the handrail again. Just a soft pull, but it shifted, ever so slightly. A bolt near the base was misaligned, not loose but off-center, probably missed during visual inspection. But in an emergency, even a millimeter off could mean disaster. She raised her phone. Snap. One photo of the bolt. Snap. One of the ramp's angle. Snap. A wide shot for context. Then she opened her notes app and began logging details, like her father used to. That's when a pair of shiny leather shoes stepped into her view. "You again?" the man said with a half smile. It was the same one from earlier. His name tag read Adam Collins, lead architectural supervisor. He motioned at the ramp. "Still worried about the scary slope?" She said nothing, just turned her screen toward him and showed the bolt. "This violates code," she said quietly. Adam glanced at the image, then chuckled. "If I had a nickel for every time someone said that, I'd be designing luxury towers in Dubai," he smirked. "Edward's daughter, right? Makes sense. You've been trained to find problems that aren't real." She stayed silent. "I get the enthusiasm, kid," he said as he turned to leave. "But this place was signed off by professionals." Then he was gone. Aaliyah didn't move. She just stared at the ramp, not out of doubt, but calculation. The numbers lined up too cleanly in her head to ignore. Suddenly, an announcement echoed overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, please follow your host to the Grand Glass Gallery." Her stomach dropped. The Grand Glass Gallery, suspended above the atrium, anchored by steel cables, reinforced panels, and tension strut supports, was built to impress. It hosted VIP events, demos, even live music. But Aaliyah remembered its placement from old city brochures, and now, standing beneath it, she saw something no one else had. A crack, small, spider-webbed, barely visible near the southern anchor point, right where the structure met the wall. It hadn't been there before. She wheeled herself under the gallery. In the shadows cast by the angled supports, she used her phone's flashlight and zoomed in. It wasn't cosmetic. It was stress, real structural fatigue. Quickly, she opened her simulation app, estimated the span, the weight, the number of people on the tour. The result chilled her. Under full occupancy, the load exceeded safe tension limits. Not total collapse, but a chain reaction. Enough to cause flex, maybe even cracking panels, and right now, people were stepping in. She spun and rushed back toward the atrium. "Dad," she said, urgent, "the gallery. There's a structural issue. Too much tension. I saw stress cracks in the plaster. If they fill it up." He turned to her, startled by the tone. "Aaliyah." "I'm serious," she pushed. Nearby, Jorge Ruiz, her father's old colleague, overheard. "Everything all right?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "She believes the gallery might be compromised," Edward said carefully. Jorge laughed. "I'm sure it's safe." "They altered materials or messed up the engineering," she fired back. "That's a bold claim." "I can prove it," she said, showing her screen. He barely glanced. "This isn't the time for amateur inspections, young lady." The woman beside him gave a polite, patronizing smile. Aaliyah turned to her father. "If I'm wrong, I'll leave quietly. But if I'm right—" He hesitated. The years of shame, of silence, weighed on his answer. But he didn't stop her. Above them, people were already entering the glass gallery. Then it happened. The floor creaked. Most people didn't hear it, just a soft groan like an old house settling, masked by chatter, laughter, and ambient music. But Aaliyah heard it. Sitting just beneath the grand glass gallery, she watched the way the light flickered along the supports, the subtle tremble of the steel, the way tension moved unnaturally across the structure. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She knew. Above her, the silhouettes of 20 people moved about casually, staff, donors, tech investors. Some hovered near the glass railing, others explored a glowing map projected on the far wall. The weight was uneven, and that was the problem. The tension cables overhead weren't breaking, not yet, but they were flexing outside spec. The rhythm of stress was wrong, offbeat, a signal no one else could feel. She backed away, scanning for anyone who might listen. But all she saw were smiles, champagne, and polished shoes. No one was looking down. The whole building, she realized, was like that, gorgeous on the surface, hollow underneath, a presentation, a performance. But when real people started walking through it, the flaws were forced into view. And now, those flaws were under pressure. She pivoted and rolled fast toward the security kiosk near the main entrance. A man in a navy blazer stood nearby, talking into his earpiece. "Excuse me," she said, breath sharp. "I need to report a structural issue in the glass gallery. It's urgent." He barely looked up. "Guests should remain with the tour group." "I'm not a guest," she snapped. "There's tension loss in the supports. There's already stress fracturing in the plaster. It could fail." He blinked, that neutral customer service smile still locked in place. "If you're concerned about access, we do have an online form." "No," she interrupted. "This isn't about access. It's about safety." He frowned. "Are you part of the engineering team?" She hesitated. No badge, no ID, just her phone, her chair, and a warning no one believed. "I need to speak to someone in charge," she insisted. "There's a schedule," he replied flatly. She turned away, frustrated. Overhead, digital screens played a live feed from the gallery. Guests smiled, posed, laughed. Then her eyes locked on something. A man leaned casually against a southern beam, the same one from her model, the one near the microfracture. The light at his feet warped slightly. She knew then, it wasn't theory anymore. She found her father. "Dad," she said, louder than ever, "you have to back me up. That gallery's not safe. I've run the load curves 4 times. It's underbuilt." He paused, studied her face, then the data on her phone. The numbers, the angles, the stress alerts, flashing red. No words, just a nod. They approached a staff member near the center. Edward cleared his throat. "Ma'am, there's a problem in the gallery. My daughter ran a simulation. She believes the tension supports are at risk. You need to evacuate." The woman blinked, smiled. "Sir, the gallery passed full inspection. Two separate firms. Everything's within tolerance. You're not listening, Aaliyah said, stepping forward. There's a micro crack beneath the south anchor. You need to act now. Still calm, still polite, the woman replied. The building is fully certified, but if you like, I can escalate this to someone in operations. Get your head engineer, Aaliyah snapped. The woman's expression changed. She stepped aside, muttering into her headset. Code 7, possible issue. Get an engineer on standby. A moment later, a man approached. Stocky, late 40s, clipboard in hand. Official future-built jacket. Serious eyes. What's the issue here? Edward motioned to his daughter. She's an analyst in training, and she's found something your team missed. She believes it's dangerous, Edward said. The man glanced at Aaliyah, puzzled. How old are you? Old enough to know your anchor bolts are misaligned and your tolerances are off by 15%, she replied, her voice calm. He stared. She didn't blink. She held out her phone. Detailed simulation data, close-ups of the microfracture, load curve projections. His expression darkened. Where'd you get the beam specs? They're public, she said. Filed last month in the city's planning database. I matched them to what I saw today. The anchoring system doesn't match the blueprint. Let me see that photo again, he said, now fully serious. She handed him the phone. He zoomed in, studied the image carefully, and his brow tightened. I need to see the subfloor, he muttered. He tapped his headset. This is Howard. Pause all foot traffic in Gallery 1. I'm heading under the south anchor. A gentle chime rang through the building, followed by a recorded voice. For your safety, please remain still during this brief maintenance check. Upstairs, movement slowed. The gallery grew quiet. Howard crossed the atrium quickly and vanished through a maintenance door. Aaliyah followed, keeping her distance. Her father stayed behind, fielding a flurry of staff questions as tension started to ripple through the event space. Inside the corridor, it was colder, quieter. Howard crouched beside the base of the southern support with a flashlight, inspecting every seam and joint. Aaliyah stopped just behind him, watching. He tapped the anchor, then ran a hand along the wall. His fingers paused over the crack, and then he swore under his breath. This wasn't here yesterday, he said quietly. It wasn't designed to last, Aaliyah replied. The load is too high. It's flexing. He stood upright, face pale now. No more doubt, just clarity. He pressed his headset again. Immediate evacuation. Gallery 1. Repeat. Evacuate now. Back in the atrium, a sharp alert sounded. 2 quick sirens. A calm voice followed. Attention guests. For your safety, we are initiating an emergency evacuation of Gallery 1. Please follow the nearest staff member and remain calm. The smiles disappeared. Voices rose. Security personnel moved quickly. And Aaliyah? She just sat still, watching it all unfold, not with pride, not with panic, but with the quiet certainty of someone who saw what no one else did. I'm heading under the base support, Howard said. Within moments, a soft chime echoed through the center. A calm voice followed. Please remain still. A brief maintenance inspection is underway. Upstairs, footsteps slowed. Guests paused mid-conversation. Howard disappeared into the maintenance corridor, and Aaliyah followed, quietly, carefully. Her father stayed behind, now fielding concerned whispers from staff. Inside the corridor, it was cold and dim. Howard crouched at the southern anchor, flashlight in hand. Aaliyah stopped a few feet away, watching as he tapped the joint, then ran his fingers along the plaster, and then he cursed. This wasn't here yesterday. It wasn't meant to last, she said. The load's too high. It's flexing. Howard stood, pale. His voice was low but firm as he spoke into his radio. Immediate evacuation of Gallery 1. Repeat. Evacuate now. In the atrium, the sirens chirped twice. The overhead voice returned. Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, the grand glass gallery will be temporarily closed for inspection. Please proceed to the central lounge. Upstairs, silhouettes shifted. Guests began trickling out, some annoyed, others taking selfies. Unaware how close they'd come to disaster, Aaliyah exhaled. Her hands trembled. You just stopped something serious, Howard said. Someone built it wrong, she answered. He hesitated. No, someone changed it after we signed off. These aren't the same materials. I was on the original install. What's there now? It's a downgrade. Her eyes narrowed. Then someone covered it up. He didn't respond. Back in the atrium, murmurs spread like cracks in glass. Edward met her halfway. What did he say? That I was right. Her father nodded, proud, but worried. They're going to want answers. So do I, she said. A few minutes later, a senior staff member approached. Older, suit pressed, voice polished. I'm Douglas Crane, Deputy Operations Manager. I understand you flagged the issue. Would you be willing to go over your findings? I already did. He hesitated, then offered a polite smile. Before we escalate, perhaps we could go over it quietly, in private. Aaliyah looked him dead in the eye. You're trying to contain it. I'm trying to prevent panic, he replied. You understand? No, she said. I really don't. She turned to Edward. We're going home. Douglas blinked. You're leaving? We've done our part, Edward said. Now it's yours. They exited the building under a darkening sky. Somewhere behind them, engineers scrambled to explain how a teenage girl in a wheelchair had saved their centerpiece from collapse. But Aaliyah wasn't interested in recognition. She had questions about the missing supports, the swapped-out materials, the silence, and she would find the answers, whether they wanted her to or not. That night, in her room, the sky outside turned steel gray, threatening rain. Her fingers moved across her keyboard, not rushed, but steady. She wasn't guessing anymore. She was building a case. On her screen, layered floor plans came into focus, like sediment layers, each one telling a different truth. The original concept, her father's design, bold and inclusive. The city-approved version, stripped down but still sound. And then there was this version, the one that was actually built. Her 3D reconstruction showed it all. Missing supports, thinner glass, weaker alloys. Just enough flash to impress. Just enough change to break it. Come see this, she called. Her father stepped in, looking exhausted but still standing. She turned the laptop toward him. This is the gallery, your gallery. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. And this red layer? He asked. That's the weight distribution, she said. He leaned closer. And for the first time in years, Edward James didn't look defeated. He looked ready. After they altered the southern anchor, Aaliyah said, zooming into the 3D model. It unbalanced the entire load path. Her father's jaw tightened. She pointed to another detail. And these crossbeams? Look at the metal spec. He bent closer, reading the embedded code on a scanned label. Aluminum composite, he muttered. That's not even grade 4. Exactly, she replied. And it's not what was approved. They swapped it after inspection, quietly, likely after the city signed off. He exhaled, slow and sharp. This wasn't just carelessness. No, Aaliyah said. It was deliberate. He stepped back from the desk, stunned. How far does this go? I don't know yet, but I don't think it ends with the gallery. She opened a folder, revealing photo after photo, close-ups of beams, misaligned bolts, QR scans, mismatched materials. She was building a digital library of evidence. I cross-checked every component against public records, she said. At least 8 don't match city filings. Edward sank into the chair beside her. They cut corners, she said, but not to save money. They were still within budget. This was about speed. Someone forced the job to finish early. He closed his eyes, and they falsified the paperwork to hide it. She nodded, and it worked until today. A long silence passed. Then he said, "I was wrong." She turned to him, waiting. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I kept my head down, we could move on. But silence doesn't fix anything. You were right to speak up." She didn't smile. There was no victory in being right about something that could have killed people, only responsibility. He leaned forward. "What now?" "I think I know someone who can help." She scrolled to the bottom of her contacts and tapped a name she hadn't used in over a year. Max Taylor, a journalist, an old friend of her father's. Someone who had once dared to expose development fraud and got buried for it. But he never stopped listening. The phone rang twice. "Hello? Mr. Taylor, it's Aaliyah, Edward James's daughter." A pause. "I remember," he said. "You okay?" "I have something," she replied. "Something big." He understood without needing more. Within the hour, he was at their apartment. Notepad open, recorder on. Aaliyah explained everything, the simulation, the crack, the cover-up. Edward added context. Old memos, names, and quiet betrayals. With every page, Taylor's face darkened. "They buried this," he said. "And the inspector who signed off, he's not even with the company anymore?" Edward nodded. "Pushed out 2 months ago, no explanation." "They replaced a certified inspector with a ghost," Taylor muttered, "and hosted photo ops under a ceiling that could have collapsed on 20 people." He stood, pacing, then stopped. "This is a story," he said. "A real one." Aaliyah didn't hesitate. "Run it. Use my name." He looked at Edward. "She speaks for both of us," he said. By midnight, the article was live. Cracks in the future. How one girl exposed a disaster waiting to happen. At the top was a photo of the gallery's understructure, annotated with Aaliyah's diagrams. Her name was right there under the headline, and the internet noticed. By morning, the post had gone viral. A trending hashtag emerged. Videos from the launch, screenshots from the gallery feed, interviews with guests, shock, outrage, momentum. By 3 p.m., the city's engineering commission released a statement. "We are aware of reports of structural discrepancies at the FutureBuilt Center and have launched an immediate investigation." FutureBuilt released one too, sterile, vague, "We take all safety concerns seriously. Our commitment to innovation and inclusivity remains unchanged." Aaliyah watched it all unfold from the couch, laptop open, her father silent beside her. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. That night, the doorbell rang. A courier handed them an unmarked envelope. Inside, a cease and desist letter from FutureBuilt's legal team. Her father cursed under his breath. "They think they can intimidate us." Aaliyah stared at the letter, then opened her laptop. She typed a message to Taylor. "Let's keep going." Because this wasn't just about a building anymore. It was about the system that let it stand. And by dawn, the world was watching. Through a haze of smog and low-hanging clouds, the morning sun barely filtered through. Down on the street, buses rumbled by, passengers scrolling their phones, unaware that nearly every screen, every news ticker was flashing the same headline. Max Taylor's article hadn't just gone viral. It had detonated. Talk shows quoted it. Analysts debated it. Architecture students passed the link around like forbidden treasure. The story wasn't just news. It had become a symbol. Inside her apartment, Aaliyah sat motionless, eyes wide open, phone vibrating nonstop. Messages poured in, thank yous, interview requests, and yes, a few insults. But most were stunned. Stunned that a quiet teenager in a wheelchair had noticed what professionals had missed, or worse, ignored. Across the room, Edward stood by the window, coffee in hand, the weight of years in his silence pressing down heavier than ever. They're going to push back now, he murmured. Aaliyah didn't respond. She was already reviewing new documents Taylor had sent overnight. Internal memos, subcontractor logs, emails between executives. Someone inside FutureBuilt had started talking. An anonymous whistleblower. The story was deeper and darker. Someone had rushed the project by 3 months. Someone had authorized substandard materials after the inspections. Someone had ordered the original design reports destroyed. At 10:14 a.m., a knock. They expected it. Edward opened the door. A tall man in a gray suit stood there, calm and rehearsed. Beside him, a woman clutching a leather folder. "Mr. James," the man said. "Nicholas Grayson, legal counsel for FutureBuilt. This is Ms. Lerner." Edward didn't move. "This about the letter?" Grayson smiled faintly. "We'd prefer to discuss this in person, to avoid escalation." "We're not retracting anything," Edward said flatly. "We're not asking for that," Lerner replied quickly. "We're asking for discretion." Grayson stepped closer. "Your story has caused reputational harm. Our client is prepared to avoid legal action, but only if you agree to step away. We're offering a settlement, NDA, compensation, and this ends here." Edward folded his arms. Aaliyah's voice cut in, calm, cold. "How many people could have died if I hadn't spoken up?" Grayson blinked. "With respect, you're not qualified to—" "No," she said, "but I was right." He hesitated. "This affects more than one structure. There are contracts, partners, divisions. What you're doing is necessary," Edward finished, stepping forward. "This conversation is over." The door closed. An hour later, the phone lit up again. A radio station, a major network, a global think tank. Everyone wanted Aaliyah, some genuinely, others opportunistically. But it didn't matter. She was no longer invisible. That afternoon, they returned to the FutureBuilt Center, not as spectators, as witnesses. The Grand Glass Gallery was closed, taped off, under full investigation. Hard hats moved across the atrium. Journalists circled like satellites. Cameras tracked their every move. Inside, everything had changed. Banners down, screens black, the words "innovation in every detail" erased from the walls. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was pressure. From the far side of the hall, Adam Collins approached, disheveled, hollow-eyed, folder in hand. "Well," he muttered, "you got what you wanted?" Aaliyah didn't blink. "What do you think I wanted?" "Attention, validation. Maybe your dad's job back." Edward raised a brow. "Is that what you think this is about?" Adam gave a bitter smile. "You were always a problem, James, always asking too much." "And you didn't ask enough," Aaliyah replied. "You looked away." "I was doing my job." "No, you were protecting yourself," she said. "And now? Now everyone knows." He opened the folder. Inside, her diagrams, photos, and annotations. The evidence was everywhere now, and it wasn't going away. "Do you know what this did to our firm?" Adam Collins asked, eyes hard. "I'm not sorry," Aaliyah replied. He looked at her for a long second, then turned and walked away. Behind him, inspectors had already moved on from the gallery. Now they were checking beams in the eastern wing. One of them, a tall woman with a hard hat, gave Aaliyah a subtle nod, acknowledgement from someone who understood. In the lower lounge, Max Taylor waited near the makeshift press area. "They're shutting it down," he said. 3 new fractures. The city's launching a full structural review." Then he handed Edward a file. Inside were emails, internal, from the whistleblower. Aaliyah read them, her expression still. "They knew," she said. "They knew the materials were bad." "And signed off anyway," Max confirmed. "What now?" Edward asked. "We publish everything," Max said. "This time, with names." That evening, the second article went live. Buried beneath glass, the secret deals behind the future-built scandal. It was longer, angrier. It named senior engineers, directors. It showed how the budget was rigged, how inspection reports were edited, how signatures were forged. It named Adam Collins. The fallout was swift. The firm's website vanished. Executives resigned. The city council called an emergency hearing. The state board launched an investigation. Aaliyah watched it all from the couch, laptop in hand, her father beside her. "You did this," he said quietly. She didn't smile. "They're not done." "No," Edward said, "but now they have to survive in the light." Outside, the rain finally began to fall. It ran down the windows and across the city like a cleansing wave, not deep enough to erase what had been built, but enough to reveal the cracks. Sometimes, all it takes is one. And she had been that first fracture. The days that followed didn't feel real. Headlines, hearings, public reaction. It was like the curtain had been pulled back on everything she used to accept as normal. For years she had watched her father fade into silence, his name buried in credits, his voice erased in meetings. And now she wasn't watching anymore. She was inside it. The silence was gone. In its place, noise, outrage, legal threats, praise, and fear. Inspectors sealed off more of the future-built center. Out-of-state engineers confirmed everything Aaliyah had said, only in bigger words. But the truth was the same. The gallery was flawed. The materials were wrong. The changes weren't authorized. And someone signed off on it. But as more light was cast, the shadows deepened. On the fourth morning, a knock. Edward opened the door to a delivery man. No package, just an envelope and a clipboard. "For Miss Aaliyah James," Edward signed. The man left without a word. Inside, another cease and desist. This one was louder, angrier. It accused Aaliyah of interfering in an active business, of unauthorized access to systems, of defaming credentialed professionals. It threatened a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Edward's hands clenched. Aaliyah read it calmly. They weren't just trying to silence her anymore. They wanted her afraid. She picked up the phone, called Max. "They sent another one," she said. "Same here," he replied. "It's noise. Lawyers waving flags. What do? We get louder." By noon, Max had written a third article. Shorter, sharper, a bullet of truth. He reprinted the letter in full, then dismantled it line by line, and ended with, "If this is what truth costs, we'll keep paying." Aaliyah's name was in bold at the top. She hadn't asked for it. She didn't need to. He knew. The backlash was instant. Some called them heroes. Others called them reckless. In architectural circles, think pieces began to appear, warning about the dangers of amateur interference and the so-called mob trial created by public outrage. Online, the harassment grew sharper. Anonymous accounts filled Aaliyah's inbox with threats, mockery, and worse. One message chilled her more than the rest. It came through her school email. No subject, no sender. Just a single line. "You don't know what you've started." The blinking cursor beneath it felt like a countdown. Her hands trembled for the first time. She didn't delete it. She forwarded it to Taylor, then opened a blank document. Names, dates, screenshots, notes, everything she remembered went into it. If something happened, someone would know the whole story. That evening, they got another visitor. Not a lawyer, not a courier. An older man, graying, heavy-set, with quiet eyes. "Name's Samuel Darrow," he said. "Former city inspector. He had worked on the future-built project years ago. Quit before final approval. Too many red flags, too many shortcuts. I couldn't stop it," he said. "But I didn't want my name on it when it went wrong." He handed them a folder, his own notes from the early phase, memos, flagged changes, quiet warnings. Not enough for a full indictment, but enough to show he'd seen the rot start early. Aaliyah scanned the pages. She saw familiar names: Adam Collins, Gregory Mann, Nicholas Grayson, and others who'd never appeared in press releases but made real decisions behind the scenes. "You said you missed it," she told Darrow. "I didn't miss it," he replied. "I just didn't know how to stop it." She looked down at her hands. "I'm just a girl," she said quietly. "That's why they didn't see you coming," he replied. The next day, the city's oversight committee formally requested Aaliyah to testify. Her father objected. She was 14. She wasn't an employee. But the committee insisted. She had become a key witness. In a beige conference room on the 12th floor, Aaliyah faced 5 committee members. Behind her, framed photos of bridges and highways lined the walls. They asked questions: what she saw, how she documented it, what tools she used. She answered clearly, no theatrics, just facts. "How did you learn to run structural simulations?" one member asked. "My dad taught me the basics," she said. "I learned the rest myself." "Why didn't you bring this to someone sooner?" "I tried," she said. They didn't laugh. One committee member leaned forward. "Do you believe this was an isolated failure?" She paused. "I think it's a culture," she said. They dismissed her 20 minutes later. In the hallway, everything felt too quiet. She didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That evening, a formal notice was delivered to FutureBuilt's headquarters. The state had ordered a full audit. Their license was suspended, pending investigation. The next morning, she received a message from the whistleblower. Just one word: "Thank you." And it meant everything, because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The city awoke to new headlines, not questioning if something had gone wrong, but asking how it was allowed for so long. Within 48 hours, leaks from the audit confirmed what Aaliyah had already uncovered: downgraded materials, skipped inspections, falsified reports. Internal communications revealed decisions made for speed and optics, not safety. The icon of sustainable architecture had become a monument to systemic failure. Inside the now-closed FutureBuilt Center, crews in city uniforms stripped banners from the walls. The atrium was silent. The gallery, wrapped in caution tape, looked less like progress, more like a crime scene. Leadership had vanished. Gregory Mann hadn't made a public appearance in over a week. Adam Collins resigned, leaving only a defensive statement through his lawyer. And Nicholas Grayson? His emails had surfaced in the whistleblower's files, where he advised upper management to contain reputational risk through targeted discreditation. That phrase had become infamous, but Aaliyah James wasn't a risk. She was a reckoning. That night, Aaliyah sat alone in her room, window open, the breeze rustling through blueprints and scattered notes on her desk. It had been 12 days since she first rolled onto the ramp at FutureBuilt. 12 days since her wheels slipped, since she raised her voice in a room full of silence, since the laughter. But no one was laughing now. She had just wrapped another phone interview, this one with a journal on ethics and engineering, when her father stepped in holding a thick envelope. "Certified mail," he said. She opened it carefully. Inside, an official commendation from the Department of Civil Oversight. The letter recognized her extraordinary attention to detail, personal courage, and outstanding contribution to public safety. Heavy paper, embossed seal. A handwritten note enclosed read, "You reminded us that integrity doesn't come from credentials, it comes from action." She placed it gently beside her laptop, then looked up at her father. "What now?" she asked. He smiled. "Whatever you want." That afternoon, they were invited to a public forum at the city's convention hall. No formal agenda, no speeches promised, but everyone knew what it was for. It wasn't to talk about policy, it was to face what had been broken. When Aaliyah entered, People stepped aside. Some clapped, others nodded. A few asked to shake her hand. She hardly noticed the cameras. Her eyes were fixed on the stage. One chair sat slightly apart from the long row of officials, waiting. A woman took the microphone first, welcoming the audience. She spoke about transparency, accountability, the weight of silence, and the power of speaking when it mattered. Then she called Alia's name. The room stood. Alia wheeled herself forward. No assistant, no pomp, just quiet resolve. She wore a plain blazer, a clean shirt, nothing to distract from the truth. She took the mic and spoke. "I wasn't supposed to be there that day," she said, voice steady. "I wasn't invited. I wasn't asked to speak. But when I did, no one listened." She paused. "They said I was just a kid, that the professionals had it covered, but the professionals let something dangerous be built. They said it was safe. It wasn't." She looked across the crowd. Engineers, leaders, students. "I didn't speak up to be brave. I spoke up because it felt wrong. And if I had stayed silent and something happened, I wouldn't have been able to live with that." She took a breath. "I don't want fame. I don't want awards. I want buildings to be safe. I want truth to matter more than reputation. And I want everyone in this room to remember, sometimes the person you ignore is the one who sees what you missed." The silence that followed was deep, and then the applause started. Quiet, then stronger. When she returned to her seat, the mayor rose. He didn't speak long, just enough to say the city owed her more than thanks, and that change had begun. That night, as city lights shimmered through her window, she asked her father, "Do you think they'll really change?" He looked out over the skyline. "Some will, some won't, but they can't pretend anymore." She nodded. "Then I'm not done." "With architecture?" he asked. "With truth," she replied. Weeks passed. The future-built center remained closed. Repairs began, overseen by a neutral firm. The original leadership faced formal investigations. The firm was restructured, and something else happened. New legislation started moving through city council, transparency in material sourcing, public access to inspection reports, digital traceability of safety audits. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Alia returned to school. Her teachers treated her like someone older. Her classmates watched her with quiet disbelief. She didn't let it change her. She kept studying, kept building. Her father gave her his old drafting table. She set it up in the living room like an altar to what was coming next. Then, one morning, an invitation from the National Conference for Emerging Engineers. They were launching a new youth forum, inspired by her. They didn't invite her because she was young or in a wheelchair. They invited her because she had seen something no one else would face. On the day of her talk, the auditorium was full. Students, professors, professionals. Her name was printed on the program with no title beside it, just Alia James. She rolled onto the stage and began, "I was 14 when I saw the crack," and the world listened.